Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have yourselves ready and in that chair, because it's time for the good news, the bad news, and the other shit. That's right. Good news, bad news, and other shit. Ooh, yeah. It's that kind of a day, everybody. It's that kind of a day because we feel, on the one hand, excited about the chance to celebrate the life of one of our heroes, but in other ways, the issues that remembering him bring up for us cause us to be somewhat in conflict. The subject of today's news is Muhammad Ali, his legacy, and what is his place in history. I chose to do this because I thought that Victor and I would be able to give you, that by you I mean our viewers, a different perspective. For some it won't be different, but for others maybe so, about what his life was, his place in history, because he very much was a fabric of the experience that we were going through. That's why it's hard to talk about just even a part, because we're going to end up bouncing all over the place. Because the experiences with Muhammad Ali go on for a lifetime. For a lifetime. They started for me when I was in junior high school. No, even before, elementary school. Because at that time he was Cassius Clay. And already controversial. But that's the point of this, because I'm watching news today, Vic, and I don't appreciate some of the ways things they say in the same way, because the people who are attempting to supposedly give him homage, we know hated him. Major media hated him. Yeah. So to sit there and watch them try to do this stuff. What's interesting is even when they show something positive, the pictures that they tend to show.
Right.
So I'm still critical of Fox and major media.
Right.
The other thing that bothers me is that they love to say he transcended race. I agree with Smitty. I said, think about that. No, you never hear that applied to white folks. You never hear it applied that white folks have transcended race. Mm-hmm. You don't hear it that, religious people, right. That Einstein transcended religion.
Right.
No, because in a way that would be insulting. Mm-hmm. Muhammad Ali didn't transcend blackness. He transcended white racism. Mm-hmm. That's the story. And that's why his place in history is what it is, and why America has so much trouble at this time attempting to acknowledge a man who, throughout his whole existence, did nothing but express hatred for him.
Right.
Nothing but hatred. All we heard was hatred. Now, the context of this, I have to put to people, to a degree is personal, but it's hard to understand it without understanding the times. We look at Donald Trump today, and I tell everybody, when I was 12 and 13, that was all of America. All of America to me, except for a small... if you had to ask the average black person, they would have said 90% white folks was racist.
Right.
That's what we would have said.
Right.
And, you might have got some said 85%.
Off perspective, right?
Right. And now I tell people, look, of course people would have had argument. I use Donald Trump existence today to show you when you have that level of racism around today, when people didn't think it was there.
Right.
Imagine what it was back in there. They hated Muhammad Ali. They hated a black man, first of all, to a white America at that time. For a black man to even hold their head up and say no was such an act that they would want to kill you.
Right.
When the brothers raised their fist at the Olympics, that affected the rest of their careers. America was vicious when it came to, so having a natural, so you have to remember, getting a natural, for me, growing a natural was a big issue between my mother and I, because she refused to let me have one because of her fears of the police beating me up. You got to understand the context of the time. Right. The context of the time is that I didn't become black until I was about 13 years old. Right. Up until that time, I had been Negro. My mother said she was Negro, colored,
Right.
then Negro, then black, and then African American now.
Right.
So these all, in my lifetime, at least I went through those. Negro, everybody before James Brown said, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud.
Right.
Before that record and that movement, when saying you were black became a pop movement within black culture. Now, why is that so important? Because Muhammad Ali, to us, was the first black man to stand up to the system. To say I'm pretty.
Right.
White folks today don't get that. You don't understand how revolutionary it was for any black man to have the audacity to declare himself pretty. How dare you? They would want to kill you for that. Do you understand? People say, I don't. No. See, again, the context is here today.
Right.
They would want to kill you, beat you to a pulp because you dared to say you were pretty. Okay?
Right.
They didn't want you to look them in the eye. Now, Vic and I can tell you we've been fighting this kind of racism all our lives. So therefore, when Muhammad Ali declared himself, rejected his quote-unquote slave name, joined up with the black Muslims, which is another whole story and issue.
Right.
Got himself became a tutor of Malcolm X.
Right.
At least they came together in his early years. So all of these things, that's part of why so a lot of white folks don't understand why we love him so much. And this is why. They don't understand why saying I'm pretty was revolutionary.
Right.
I said, so I can't let those things go by because the media today, in many ways, as they show you him, they actually are attempting to mock him. And they put things out of context.
Right.
It was revolutionary, courageous,
Right.
powerful for a black man of his ilk to say, I am pretty. To say that black people are beautiful.
Right.
To say black is beautiful was revolutionary. And again, would get you killed. Okay?
Right.
So this is why we honor him. They took away, when he refused to be drafted to Vietnam as a conscientious objector, that wasn't enough. It was because he said, no Vietnamese ever called me nigger. White America bristled.
Right.
Okay, America hated him. America hated him for the same reasons we were loving him. So he was a conscientious objector, refusing to go to Vietnam. And because of that, they stripped him of his status, his ability. They actually found him guilty, Vic. He had a 5-year sentence that went to appeal. He was operating under the idea that he could go to jail.
Now, let me just, with this, I've seen reports. It's different when it's reported from here in many cases and then from abroad. I specifically went to look at what I call the international reporting, the aspects of how they see things. So are there a few that you specifically are focused on? Because I've seen some good reports coming from people growing up at that time. And what's more important, the reports that I see that are more important to me are not the people who lived and was going through that period of time, are the ones who said, I wasn't born until the mid-'70s or I wasn't born until the 90s, and to hear how they're interpreting what has happened. So you get a different perspective.
Oh, yeah. No, I would say I am actually refreshed and enjoying some of the stuff that's coming from some of the youth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fox, CNN.
Well, see, now you're
traditional media sources are horrible.
Well, see, that's what I was trying to get.
They're particularly because they hated him. I love they had your Republican House, Mitch McConnell, talking about, well, he's from Kentucky. From Kentucky, we out of him. You hated him in Kentucky.
Wait.
You hated him.
Yeah, you're going.
You hated him.
Let me say what you're doing now. Your first name drop is Mitch McConnell. What does that tell you?
Well, I'm just saying, I said major media. Remember, CNN, Fox,
right.
The kind of things that they say, the kind of things that they post. once again, this is someone they hated.
Right.
The sports, even ESPN.
Right.
Every major, as far as I know, they learned to love Ali, but they hated him in the beginning, like all of America, because America hated a black man who didn't humble himself to them. Mm-hmm. That's what they wanted you always to do. So, and then coming up as I did in the 60s, we were rebellious and therefore were risking death.
Right.
So our parents and us were at conflict.
Right.
So he was my hero in a lot of ways for a lot of those reasons, because he dared to say, I am pretty.
Right.
Black is beautiful.
Right.
That he refused to be drafted for three and a half years of the major part of his career, he couldn't fight.
Absolutely.
And then he still had to come back and fight and become champion. Again, what a story. That's why we honor him. That's why we honor him, and that's why I try to tell people it's important to remember the times.
Right.
Take a look at these pictures Victor put here together. Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King. Here you have Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown. At that time, he had changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Right. Lou Alcindor.
Right. Similar occurrences.
Right.
Similar occurrences. And again, the fight Sonny Liston.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a new ringtone that Mario just purchased. He purchased that from the DEA.
Huh?
I'm just
telling you. If you ever wonder, you all, why we honor Muhammad Ali, at all those points, he was a warrior out in front. Now, and this is where I get into controversy with a bunch of people over Jackie Robinson. And I still have discussion with my mother, because some of us let ourselves be paraded out in front of the media telling black people basically to behave, like the civil rights movement was misbehaving.
Right.
I had a discussion with my mother because they honored Jackie Robinson more than what I did, because even though he had done and come through those times, during these times, you did not see him as part of these things.
Right.
He was not a part of these types of things. And this is why the generational gap is there for some of us.
Right.
For Jackie Robinson, he was the Republican of the time the black Republican that they would march out to tell you to behave.
Right.
And behave meant not to protest or be part of the civil rights movement. And so, for that same reason, that's why Jackie Robinson is not one of my heroes at all. But the people that are sitting about this table, many of them are my heroes.
Right.
These are my heroes. Right. And for the reason, because they came out, this man gave up 3.5 years of his ability to work, to stand behind a principle.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well, and for me, I have to get more story. The only reason why I say, because it's different when you're living in the time that the person is in. And for me, even with Cassius Clay, which was, I loved the name at the time, because when you're on a certain age, you go, wow, I like that name. The only difference is, to akin to Jackie Robinson, because it's not an excuse, is to look at it in comparison to what I say Jack Johnson. Muhammad Ali wasn't the first black boxer, but Jackie Robinson was the first in his particular sport. So I would actually love to go, which I haven't done, is to really go read on what that meant. Because at that period of time, which a lot of that was happening before Muhammad Ali's time, is to understand what he was going through at that time. Because to see the climate of what's going on right now in 2016, I can't imagine what it was like in the late 40s. Well, that's under the presumption, what do you do to protect your family? So I have to go read more. I haven't had. You had the advantage.
Well, that's the discussion my mother and I in other words, my mother's point of view was that they still were going to give Jackie Robinson credit and homage for these things.
Right.
The difference, she said, between my generation and her generation
Right.
was that we were the revolutionaries.
Right. The 60s.
So I said, Mama, how could you ask me to value him
Right.
when every day I saw black people get beat down in the street?
Absolutely.
I said, that's my point of view. I
Yeah.
said, there were the black folks, we called them the house niggas.
Right.
There's terms that you use.
Right.
Who came out, and there are people who did things that I forgave
Right.
that were embarrassing. Sammy Davis Jr. hugged Richard Nixon. I brought up a bunch of things that embarrassed us. Do you remember how embarrassing that was? There was a bunch of things, but we forgave. I just said, Mom, the context for me at 12 and 13 is that I was watching people get beat down in the street.
Right.
I had to admire
Right.
the men and women that I saw standing up.
Oh, I agree.
And I said, that's the difference. Well, you all were still giving that homage to Jackie, but I was angry at him.
Right.
Because he wasn't doing what Muhammad Ali was doing.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I said I have to go read the story, because part of stories is framing that there wasn't no severe threats against Jackie Robinson in comparison. And so to me, part of the story is the whole illusion is that, hey, this is what he went through being the first. And
he was their man, too. They treated him like their man.
But see, still the same thing comes in is when politics today, like I said, you think politics is any different when you actually are sitting there behind the room where you're having relationships by people who want to present an image of what you invest and buy into. So that's why I said when I do my new sports, I'm looking at my individual perspective, because I actually want to go read about Jackie and Louis Armstrong, which I heard about those stories as well. I know about Sammy. I know all about
the rebels versus the ones.
But the part that I don't want to do is say because you didn't do this. Because if that's the case, we have a whole bunch of athletes today that are failing.
And again, I'm not giving mine from the perspective of someone who's here looking back on history.
Right.
I'm giving the perspective of a person who was right there.
Right.
Being confronted with the images and television.
Derek Jeter's getting it right now.
And then the black people that were coming on TV saying, don't be a part of this uprising.
Right.
Don't give us a bad name.
Oh, of course.
And then the people were saying, come out and protest against oppression, against Vietnam. So to me, my heroes still will be always the ones who came out to protest.
Yeah.
Again, that's why Muhammad Ali is a complex figure in American history, because America, just like America will never use the word genocide when they talk about the Native Americans, America will never say that they hated Muhammad Ali. And I can tell you, as anyone would tell you, ask anybody who was there, America hated this man.
Oh, yeah.
And he did everything he did in spite of the hatred and racism of America.
Confidence. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody. That's it for today. Good news. Bad news. Other shit. You decide what today was. Good news. Bad news. Other shit.